we have started with philosophy of religion, and so far we have discussed some important topics like religion without God. We have discussed religion and morality. We have discussed notions of God. And within these, in this, we have discussed the three important notions and the related problems. In every case, you should try to recall paper one, especially Indian philosophy. Then we started with proofs for the existence of God. And again, even proofs for the existence of God is not altogether new, because you have already seen the important arguments like the ontological proof or argument, cosmological, we have often seen the causal variant of this. We had seen teleological in both Plato, Aristotle, and then in Leibniz. And during Kant, you had seen moral argument for the existence of God. So yesterday, we had discussed ontological argument, and briefly I had given you the background for cosmological argument, primarily the way Saint Thomas Aquinas in 5 ways of his text Summa Theologica discusses 5 arguments. Out of that, the first 3 are the variants of cosmological, and the last 2 can be the variants of teleological. So all of this ontological, cosmological is in your handout. We will write down teleological, we'll write down moral, and we'll also write some concluding paragraph. But let me properly first explain cosmological. Once we are done with this, we will go to the next topic, that will be the problem of evil. And even there is some reference with regard to personalistic notion, especially if God is absolutely good, omnipotent, benevolent, as yesterday you had seen, then why is there suffering? Why is there evil in the world? So we'll see some differences there, okay? So let's come back to what we were discussing, cosmological argument. As I remember, I had told you that when we analyze the first 3, like argument from motion, the causal argument, the first cause argument, and the argument from contingency, in some way we can understand that 2 central arguments of cosmological argument would be the causal argument and the argument from contingency. Almost from the very beginning in both West and East philosophy, we have seen something like this. If there's anything, there must be a cause of that. Only nothing comes out of nothing. Ex nihilo nihil fit. Only what is nothing will have no cause. Everything which is there shall have a cause. So now, the objects of this world should have a cause. Whatever is in motion should have a cause. If we think about our own existence, for example, during Descartes, you have seen, he exists, he knows in an indubitable manner. Now there must be a cause. Can he be his own cause? No, because he is finite, imperfect. Can his parents be his cause? In a way, yes, but if parents are the only cause, then that would lead to infinite regress. That is, grandparents would be the cause of his parents, great-grandparents would be their cause, and so on and so forth, infinite regress, which is a fallacy, anavastha dosh. Further, parents are also limited, finite. They could have been the cause of a body, but not of the soul, the mind, the spirit. So thus, he believes if there is anything in this world, there must be a cause. And that is like the causal argument. The way Aristotle had told you about God being the unmoved mover, which is also with reference to argument from motion. He could impart motion the way beloved can inspire a lover, the way an ideal can inspire a seeker, aspirant, the way a magnet can attract iron nails. All of that were some analyses in the case of Aristotle. So now, on similar lines, Saint Thomas Aquinas is trying to argue that in this world, whatever is there should have a cause, and we cannot think about this as a kind of never-ending, beginningless series, because that would be incorrect, fallacious. We have to think about beginning of world in time. He's also citing Bible, which talks about beginning of world in time. So there is a point from where world has come into existence, and who is the cause of that world? None but God himself. A critic may wonder, if everything is dependent on cause, then why God cannot be caused? Why should God remain uncaused? So they would argue that it is like God, even if has to have a cause, it is like self-caused. Causa sui. In the case of Spinoza also, you have seen that kind of argument. So now there are some questions. Why should we not believe that the world is endless and beginningless? Why should we think it has some point of origin? So there are some arguments to support the fact that the world has a beginning in time. There is a Saint Bonaventure. फिर से ये नाम सब याद नहीं रहेगा आपको. तो theologians argue, believers argue, इस तरह से आप बोल सकते हैं. So Saint Bonaventure would say that if we accept this thesis that the world has no beginning in time, then there will be many ridiculous implications. We will be forced to accept some absurdities. So to ward off such ridiculous, absurd positions, what is better to believe is that the world has a beginning in time. So his argument is, if a world has no beginning, then by now, there would have been infinite days. That means every day, we add one more day to what is infinite. And he says this is untenable. If something is infinite, it is like immutable. It cannot change. Nothing can be added to that. But if you have to add every day a new day to the infinite series, it is quite absurd to say. So hence, you should not believe that the world is beginningless. There is a time when world has come into existence. Further, if world has no beginning, then for every solar revolution, there has to be 12 lunar revolution. And if the series is beginningless, that means there are 2 infinite revolutions. and one series or number is 12 times. So two infinite series are there. And this is again absurd to say that one infinite series is 12 times higher compared to other. So these are Saint Bonaventure's arguments. Some others have made more scientific observations. They refer to thermodynamics, law of entropy. And the law suggests that energy tries to distribute itself uniformly. For example, if you try to heat, imagine it is iron, an iron rod. You heat this part, and even if you are holding it from here, gradually heat will be transmitted to this. That is, energy, heat is trying to distribute itself uniformly. And gradually, this hotter and this cooler may be of same temperature. It continues to distribute itself as long as there is no uniform degree. And एक time ऐसा आएगा जब पूरे iron rod का temperature बराबर हो जाएगा. So this is like a scientific fact. Now you know as a matter of fact that the outer surface of the earth is cooler compared to the inner part. So it seems that as if there is, जैसे मान लीजिए कि आपने इसको तुरंत गर्म कर दिया और इधर ठंडा है, इसका मतलब है at some point of time you started to heat it, and that is why the energy is not distributed uniformly. अभी ये transition में है. So likewise they argue it seems that the energy, the heat is not uniform. So that suggests there is a point of origin, beginning, and that makes more sense. You all have talked about or studied Big Bang theory. It talks about explosion. A compressed atom would have exploded, and that is how the universe is expanding. So hence, there is a kind of point since when it comes into existence, and now it is expanding regularly. So these are some of the arguments to suggest that the world has a beginning and it is not beginningless. तो अगर world का एक पॉइंट पे शुरुआत हुआ और कॉज गॉड है, तो तब भी वो आर्ग्यूमेंट बनता है दैट इट इज लाइक यू आर एस्केपिंग जस्ट बिकॉज गॉड इज सुप्रीम. इट डज नॉट मेक एनी सेंस व्हाई गॉड शुड नॉट हैव ए कॉज. फर्दर मेनी अदर वुड सजेस्ट दैट दिस हैज टू डू विद योर पर्सपेक्टिव. इफ यू सी द वर्ल्ड एज ए ब्रूट फैक्ट, it is just there. You don't have to think about a cause. But if you think about some rational principle, if you feel that there is something like a purpose, something is happening in accordance with someone's will, intent, then you have to think about a God. But if you simply accept like a brute fact, as Russell would argue, you don't have to think about any power outside this world as the cause. Moreover, it is like a fallacy, and the fallacy is of composition. Russell and others would argue that if everything in this world has a cause, why should you think that world should also have a cause? It is like saying that every human has a mother. That does not mean humanity shall also have a mother. And hence, it is completely unjust to talk about the cause of the world. Saint Thomas Aquinas, although he's a theologian and he's following Christianity, so he would uphold the view, as the Bible would suggest, the world has a beginning in time. But for the sake of argument, he says, even if I concede that the world has no beginning, you will still have to accept God as its cause. His argument is, consider that there is a kind of footmarks in sand, in desert. And the footmarks are beginningless, endless. Even then, there should be a feet, there should be a foot who could have caused those marks. So hence, you have to think about God again as the being, owing to who everything in this world is there. So that is like argument from cause, or causal argument, first cause argument. Argument from contingency. I'm sure you are by now comfortable with something being contingent, and the contrasting thing is what? Necessary. Something is true or false, including something exists or it does not, is contingent. Everything in this world is contingent. Now, people like Aquinas and other theists are of the view, when everything is contingent, there should be something which is necessary, which should be the ground. And because of this, everything is dependent and this is independent. Like in the case of ontological argument also, you know, there is a focus on necessity, necessary existence. Findlay and some others would say, but propositions are necessary. To talk about God as necessary is not to prove, but to disprove his existence. But necessity has many implications. In the case of God, when believers insist on necessity, they talk about independence. It is not like the logical necessity that you negate and it becomes self-contradictory. In this case, if God is a necessary being, as in God is independent and every other thing is dependent. If there are dependent things, then there must be something independent. That is like their logic. If things are contingent, that means it is here now, gone next moment. So by now, world would have been almost empty. But things are continuing. So there is something which is able to give the continuity. The sustenance is there because of necessary being, and that is how God is like the source of everything. So hence, these are some of the argument. But those who don't agree, they say it is completely a fallacy, as you have seen during Hume also, Kant also. They say causation is a relation that can hold true between two events who are together in space and time. But to accept God as the cause, either as a necessary being, the cause of contingent entities, or the cause of every fact, is to go beyond what meets in your sense experience. So for Hume and Kant, during paper 1, you have seen causation shall not transcend space and time. Events who are together in space and time can have a causal connection. Otherwise, it is fallacious to apply them. So this is like cosmological argument, and then you should write down so that you don't forget. In Indian philosophy, also you have Nyaya, Kusumanjali, Karyat, Ayujanat, Dhritya. All of them can be in some way versions of cosmological argument only. बाकी जो आपने डेकार्ट में देखा, स्पिनोजा में, लाइबनीज इज टॉकिंग अबाउट स्लाइटली डिफरेंट, बट इट इज आल्सो देयर इन हिज केस. इट इज इन लॉक आल्सो इन बर्कले एज वेल. To be perceived is necessary, but to be caused by God is sufficient. So that is like again causal argument. तो जब भी पेपर 1 पढ़ना है, you should be mindful. आपको अलग से तभी रिलीजन के नोट से याद कीजिए when you are well versed with paper 1. But don't try to create any such silos. वो पेपर 1 है, वो पेपर 2 है, ऐसा है नहीं. Okay? So you have seen now cosmological argument, and I'm taking you beyond these cases. You should know that we have been discussing all of this from day 1, including Indian philosophy. जी. Hume में कैसे होगा? Hume याद कीजिए, what was Hume's position on causation? याद है Hume कौन थे? एम्पिरिसिस्ट थे. तो क्या था ह्यूम का सिंपल आइडिया? सबसे पहले याद कीजिए, एम्पिरिसिस्ट थे. व्हाट काइंड ऑफ एन एम्पिरिसिस्ट? आइडियलिस्ट. ह्यूम वाज एन आइडियलिस्ट. मैंने आपको एक लाइन दिया था कि ये मान लीजिए एम्पिरिसिज्म है, लॉक के हाथ में दें तो क्या लिखेंगे? लॉक के हाथ में एम्पिरिसिज्म देंगे तो क्या लिख देंगे इससे? मटेरियलिज्म. यू गिव इट टू बर्कले, क्या लिख देंगे? आइडियलिज्म. एंड यू गिव इट टू ह्यूम, क्या लिख देंगे? स्केप्टिसिज्म. तो ही ट्राइज टू रिमेन ए कंसिस्टेंट एम्पिरिसिस्ट. He says, if you accept any idea, the minimum that you have to tell me is from which impression that idea is created. So if you have an idea of causation, tell me the impression. If God is the cause, हम लोग teleological में कुछ चीजें लिखेंगे तो यहाँ पे भी applicable हो जाएगा. So if you accept God as the cause of this world, so there should be at least one episode when you see who is doing what. Oh, God is creating world. एक बार देखा है कि गॉड बैठ के वर्ल्ड क्रिएट कर रहे हैं तो आप मान सकते हैं. बट यू हैव नेवर सीन गॉड इज क्रिएटिंग वर्ल्ड, so you should not talk about God as the cause. Moreover, he was, when we discussed him, he was rejecting causation as a logical and a necessary relation. But he does not reject causation per se. In fact, causation is one of the central component of his empiricism. Even in laws of association, he is accepting causation. So then he explains to us what is a cause. A cause is like when you see two events regularly preceding, succeeding, you develop a sense of necessity which is rooted in your imagination and belief, and what is felt inward, you impose it on external event. तो अगर आपने एक दो बार देखा है कि गॉड क्रिएट कर रहे हैं वर्ल्ड, तब तो you can accept God. But don't go beyond, because that is like what? Trying to go beyond relation of ideas and matters of fact. So what was the recommendation? If some book is talking, consign them to flame. तो इस तरह के causation को जलाइए. इस तरह का causation नहीं चलेगा.
How is accepting this argument as a proof of God?
तो ह्यूम प्रूफ नहीं मान रहे हैं ना, ह्यूम रिजेक्ट कर रहे हैं ना. तो मैंने कहा कांट एंड ह्यूम के आर्गुमेंट को इनकॉर्पोरेट कीजिए एज क्रिटिसिज्म, नॉट एज ए प्रोपोनेंट ऑफ कॉस्मोलॉजिकल आर्गुमेंट, बट एज दोज हु आर ओपोनेंट. ठीक, अच्छा कोई बात. तो कॉस्मोलॉजिकल आर्गुमेंट अब खत्म करते हैं. लेट्स कम टू टेलियोलॉजिकल आर्गुमेंट. एंड व्हेन यू थिंक अबाउट टेलियोलॉजिकल, हम इसको फिजिको थियोलॉजिकल आर्गुमेंट भी बोल सकते हैं. एंड द रूट वर्ड इज telos. That is, the telos is like purposive. There is some kind of objective, directedness. The world has some kind of design. World has some kind of harmony, order, symmetry, and hence there must be a designer. All right. Now, generally speaking, when people may talk about ontological, cosmological, you will not be quite impressed. But when you go through teleological argument, it can, for a while, impress upon you this thought that probably yes, it sounds quite appealing. Now, again, if you try to think about the roots, as you know, people would say entire Western philosophy is a footnote to Plato. Plato is philosophy, philosophy is Plato. But likewise, the teleological argument can go to Plato's writing, it can go to Aristotle, and then you remember it is in St. Thomas Aquinas' 5 ways, especially 4th and 5th ways are hinting at a teleological argument. We will talk about Stoics during problem of evil today, and in some way that is also like some order harmony, and hence there can be many explanation of teleological argument. You come to Indian tradition, and generally, wherever there is a God, world is created. Every time there is a teleological creation. World is not mechanical. Why world is created in Indian philosophy? As you sow, so shall you reap. We have this beginningless ignorance. It has no beginning, but it can have an end. So almost from the very beginning, we are earning merits and demerits. Hence, we have to reap the fruits of our own actions. And that is again like a teleological argument. There is a design, order, harmony, and that can also be a part of, again, Indian philosophy. Nyaya, वैशेषिक न्याय कुसुमांजलि में भी आपको teleological argument मिलेगा. But one of the most interesting exposition of teleological argument is presented by, someday I'm sure I have told you during paper 1, William Paley's version. And he explains it with an analogy of a watch. So Paley would say, let's imagine you are walking through a desert, and after walking, suddenly you find in that sand a piece of stone. You analyze it, you look at it. What do you see in the piece of stone? Some kind of, say, a structure, and the mode of reality, character, the property that you see. If you want to understand why it is the way it is, you can explain it by thinking about some accidental creation of the stone. It could have been a chance outcome. Imagine there could have been a huge boulder through excessive heating, excessive cooling, rain, etc. It could have broken down, and accidentally something like this piece of stone has come into arisen. The way you see it, you can easily explain it as a chance outcome. कोई purpose नहीं था कि मुझे stone बनाना है. Imagine you are walking and further you find something comes under your feet. पैर के नीचे से निकाल ले तो इस बार ये घड़ी था. Now you look at it. Tick, 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 tick. सबने आई एम श्योर एटलीस्ट वंस यू हैव ओपनड इट टू सी ये चलता कैसे, उसके बाद वो चला नहीं होगा बट दैट डे यू हैड सीन ये चलता कैसे है, एंड यू सी द इंट्रिकेट mechanism. It is so intricately arranged. It comes like manually we cannot arrange or rearrange it. We can only destroy it. But when you look at it, you see there is a order, harmony, structure, design, and hence you are forced to think there must be a watchmaker. You cannot believe that suddenly a huge stone was broken down or ghadi nikla isme. It can be explained only if you think about watchmaker, who meticulously, with so much effort, planning, could eventually create something like this. Now think about some possibilities. This is मैंने कहा that as a child we could have opened it and then we created some problem or it became a defective one, it stopped to work. Even if this watch is not working, argument is not weakened. चाहे ये काम करे ना करे या एक सुई मिसिंग हो, it is not in complete order. Some degree of defect, disorder is there. Even if you have not seen a watch before, even if you have not seen a watchmaker created, याद आ रहा है? ह्यूम ने कहा था कि बैठ के बनाते देखा है, आपने नहीं देखा है watchmaker को बनाते हुए, but the only possible hypothesis could be नहीं, there must be a watchmaker, this cannot be a chance outcome. So he has given a very thought-provoking interpretation. Everyone has praised it. If you remember, we had seen Kant has also appreciated it. But the only problem is that even if we accept it, at best, God becomes a designer. God becomes an architect. It does not prove that God is absolutely perfect. So that is there, but overall, it can be quite impressive. In general, also, if you think about your own nature, immunity, even eyes, and we have something like that, nature of preservation, self-preservation. All of that can somehow suggest that with so much planning, we have been created. You look around, you see beauty. Look at the wings of birds or even butterflies. ऐसा लगता है जैसे दिन भर किसी अच्छे जगह बैठ के प्लान करके कलर भरवाया है बटरफ्लाई ने, कि ऐसे ही मैं नहीं चली जाती उसने पहले किसी अच्छे जगह पे रंग करवा के. पैरेट में से कि आई एम गोइंग वेरी सिंपल टुडे, लेकिन थोड़ा सा यहाँ पे लाल रिबन लगा दो मुझे या लिपस्टिक लगा लूं क्या, तो पैरेट विल पुट आल्सो लिपस्टिक. एंड देन यू सी इन अकॉर्डिंग विद द क्लाइमेट दे आर एडिक्वेटली इन सम वे एंडोर्ड टू डील विद एक्सट्रीम कोल्ड, एक्सट्रीम हॉटनेस. पानी नहीं है तो कैमल तो क्या हुआ, हम तो रह लेते हैं. इफ इट इज अगेन सैंड तो क्या हम तो चल लेते हैं. तो कैमल इज क्रिएटेड इन सच अ वे दैट इट इज फेसिंग नो प्रॉब्लम इवन इन डेजर्ट. तो somehow you look around and you see that there is so much order or harmony. Some people have talked about that proportion, beauty proportion. And again, you see that overall, almost in every aspect of reality, that proportion is there. So somehow, this argument is very impressive. And when William Paley is talking about it, he is before Darwin. So we have not understood how probably there has been some evolution, etc. But his arguments are quite impressive. Later, you have seen some criticism. चलिए criticism की बात कर ही लेते हैं. You have seen Kant's admiration and also the criticism. But Hume is very vehemently criticizing all the proofs, including teleological argument. So he would say that you have only seen symmetry. What about asymmetry? There are many other such episodes when you see disorder, natural calamity, and all of that should also be taken into consideration. And again, like an empiricist, for every idea there should be one corresponding impression. You have never seen God create a world. So how do you know that this world is a product that is created by all powerful, omnipotent God? Further, the way world is functioning, it is more like an organism. So his point is that rather than accept a creator, what is more relevant to think about the origin from some egg. Think about the way certain plant may come, certain species may come into existence, and don't talk about God as the creator. And he says that if you talk about rationality, you think the world is so much perfect, he is again sarcastic. He says, I believe a committee of 10 smaller gods who are dim-witted, and God is omniscient, absolutely intelligent. बोलेंगे एक कमिटी हो 10 मंद बुद्धि गॉड की, तो आई थिंक दे वुड हैव डन ए बेटर वर्क देन व्हाट आई सी अराउंड मी. So Hume is very critical. But then there are many scientists also, and they have to think about the explanation. And they say when we study nature, the best hypothesis to explain this nature is that there is a designer, there is a creator, and this argument is more about how all explanations, scientific explanations, fail to explain the natural order sufficiently. No theories could ever explain the world sufficiently. तो बेहतर hypothesis समझ रहे हैं ना? Hypothesis is like a possible theory which is to be proven. You remember, for example, in the case of Nyaya, we were talking about different kinds of anuman. So we had seen eventually Swarthanuman, Pararthanuman. तो Pararthanuman is like when you offer syllogism, reasoning to prove something. तो जो प्रतिज्ञा है वो एक तरह से क्या है, हाइपोथेसिस है, और बाद में निगमन है तो hence proved है. तो अगर एक हाइपोथेसिस के रूप में समझें तो शायद this is the most complete answer. That does not mean you are accepting God as a metaphysical reality, but you are only suggesting that there is a possibility that there could have been some such a principle which is giving order, unity, symmetry to this world. One such name is F.R. Tennant. And he is aware of Darwin's writing also. But he is saying, if you think about the way every component of nature has some interdependence, there is a kind of adaptability. We have reason, and through that reason, when we examine the nature, we get to know the reality. We have some kind of, as I said earlier, immunity. We require some energy, and nature is there to take care of everything. you see how there is ozone layer to protect. There's a kind of a food web. There's a kind of mechanism in every being who has some significance for other. And that seems like well designed, well structured, created whole. And hence it would be one of the best possible hypotheses to explain this order, harmony, symmetry. Gradually you will get a bit comfortable with this name, रिचर्ड स्विनबर्न, बट फिर से प्रेशर नहीं लेना, नाम याद ना हो कोई बात नहीं, नाम आप पेपर 1 के ही याद रखिए. Richard Swinburne has used a theory of probability. So there was this statistician Bayes. इनके नाम के हिसाब से Bayesian theory of probability है. So Swinburne is saying when we take evidences, then evidences as per this probability suggest that there is a high degree of probability to support that world has order, harmony. There is a kind of symmetry and evidences are strongly supporting that. एक तरह से आप ये generally भी देख सकते हैं, even as a body there is so much system within and likewise around us, and all of that is only talking about order, harmony. It does not say thus God is there, but it is saying it is indeed almost self-evident that the world has some design, structure, harmony, order. Newton, as a scientist, is saying that when you understand the nature of mathematics, it does not seem like just a theorem or just a mechanical system. It seems to have some intelligence behind it, and hence there could be a God. James Jeans would say again that the universe is such as if it is created by some intelligent being. So it cannot be just a brute fact, like even you see in mathematics, order, harmony, symmetry. So this is how all of them are talking about, in some way, a possible explanation, and that can be seen as a teleological argument. तो हम लोग इसको लिखेंगे, then we'll go to moral argument, then we'll have a concluding discussion, and if we get time, we'll start with problem of evil also. तो चलिए पहले इसको लिखते हैं. Teleological argument या argument from design या physico-theology argument. Teleological argument, argument from design या physico-theology argument. लिखें. Of all the arguments, teleological argument is the most impressive one. Theologians, philosophers, and scientists, theologians, philosophers, and scientists, everyone, have words of appreciation for this argument. Kant has also expressed his likeness for this argument. However, as an argument, it is not able to establish the existence of God as the perfect being. It can, at best, दोनों तरफ comma, it can at best prove the existence of God as a designer, as an architect. The order, harmony, and purposiveness are at the core of this argument. Order, harmony, and purposiveness are at the core of this argument. The roots of the argument can be traced to the writings of Plato and Aristotle. It can be found in the philosophy of the Stoics as well. We'll see them shortly. It can be found, or it is present in the philosophy of the Stoics as well. The fourth and fifth ways of Saint Aquinas are the variants, versions. The fourth and fifth ways of Saint Aquinas are the variants of teleological argument, this argument. William Paley, P-A-L-E-Y, William generally जैसे लिखते हैं. William Paley in Natural Theology, 1802. William Paley in Natural Theology, capital N, capital T, presents one of the best formulation of the teleological argument. Paley explains it with the analogy of a watch. are walking through a desert land and stumble upon a piece of stone, we can accept it as a result of natural operation. Its existence could be a chance outcome, accidental. However, if we stumble upon a watch, we would be compelled to think about a watchmaker. The intricate mechanism cannot be explained through natural operation. Paley observes that the argument is not weakened even if we have never seen a watch before. Even if चाहे तो A डाल लीजिए. Even if number A या 1 we have never seen a watch before. B, we fail to understand the working of the watch, the functioning of the watch. And C, if some parts are non-functional. Paley observes that the world has a similar order, harmony, and symmetry. The world, like the watch, the world has the same order, harmony, and symmetry. Thus, the existence of the world could not be a chance outcome. There must be a world maker, namely the God as the supreme being, as the perfect being. Paley states that the nature of human being is such that we are compelled to look for a creator God. The working of human eyes is sufficient to prove that the world has a creator and designer. The working of human eyes is sufficient to prove that the world has a creator and designer. Paley presents this argument prior to Darwin's Origin of Species. Prior to Darwin's Origin of Species, capital O, capital S. Paley assumes that all forms of life have been present from the very beginning. अब हेडिंग बनाइए क्रिटिसिज्म या क्रिटिकल इवैल्यूएशन, और आप ये भी लिख सकते हैं कहीं पे रेफर टू पेपर 1 इंक्लूडिंग इंडियन फिलॉसफी फॉर फर्दर एक्सप्लेनेशन. Hume and Kant have rejected the teleological argument. Hume presents the following arguments against this proof. Hume argues, चाहे तो नंबर 1 कर दीजिए. Hume argues that the teleological argument is defective. There is no justification to move from the empirical world to the transcendental creator. There's no impression of the fact that the God is the creator of the world. Moreover, there's no impression of the God as the perfect being. We have only seen this world. If we had seen several worlds before this and would have observed God as the creator, only then we could conclude that God is the creator of this world. तो बेसिक आइडिया वही है जो याद रखना है, इंप्रेशन नहीं है फॉर द आइडिया. ओके, सेकंड पॉइंट लिखें. Hume observes that a world is bound to have some order and harmony. The Greek atomists, कौन थे Greek atomists? The Greek atomists observe that if the world is beginningless, the Greek atomists maintain or observe that if the world is beginningless, then every possible combinations could be realized, at some point of time. If the world is beginningless, every possible combinations could be realized at some point of time. It's a comma, including a watch. Hence, there is no need of a designer. Nothing exists without any design. Thus, from mere design, we cannot infer the existence of a perfect designer, capital P, capital D. Third लिखिए. Hume observes that the world is not like artifact. समझ रहे ना, artifact is a handicraft वगैरह. The world is compared with artifacts. For him, the world is more like an organism. Hence, it would be better to explain it with reference to an egg or a seed. Next लिखिए. Hume argues that the argument can at best, suggest that there is a designer. It fails to conclude that the designer is absolutely perfect. He observes that the argument does not talk about the disorder, disharmony, asymmetry, and the lack, yani deficiency. In a satirical, T-I-R-I, in a satirical way, Hume remarks that a committee of 10 dim-witted smaller gods, a committee of 10 dim-witted smaller gods could have created a better world. ये था ह्यूम का. कांट आप जानते हैं, अलग से लिख लीजिए पॉइंट. कांट क्लेम्स that the argument has some interesting points, but as a proof, it has several defects. Even if the argument is valid, it can only prove the existence of God as an architect, not as the absolutely perfect being. अगला पॉइंट लिखिए जनरल क्रिटिसिज्म के रूप में. The critics observe that the teleological argument has elements of ontological and cosmological arguments. Teleological argument क्या मैंने कहा था, प्रीसपोज या कुछ और?
Critics observe that the teleological argument has elements of
ठीक है. Hence, the defects of the ontological and the cosmological arguments further weaken the teleological argument. Also weaken the teleological argument. The defects of the ontological and cosmological arguments further weaken the teleological argument. अब हेडिंग बनाइए, रिवाइवल ऑफ द आर्ग्यूमेंट, या सिंपली रिवाइवल या डिफेंस, रीइंटरप्रिटेशन कुछ भी कर सकते हैं. In 20th century, some scientists and philosophers have tried to revive the teleological argument on the basis of scientific evidence. तो अब एक उसमें ही दो हेडिंग बना लीजिए, तो लिखिए टेनेंट्स डिफेंस, सब हेडिंग के रूप में TENNANT. अब इसके नीचे लिखिए, एक टॉपिक हो गया आपका टेनेंट्स, TENNANT. लिखें F.R.Tenant in quote unquote philosophical theology. F.R. Tenant in philosophical theology accepts teleological argument as a plausible scientific hypothesis. As a plausible scientific hypothesis. He is well aware of the criticisms of the teleological argument. यानी जो कि ह्यूम कांट ने कहा है, he is well aware of the criticisms of the teleological argument. He is well versed with Darwin's standpoint. Origin of species, descent of man. सब किताब को बाद में कभी पढ़िएगा. So he is well versed with Darwin's standpoint, well versed with Darwin's origin of species and descent of man. He maintains that the order and the harmony of the world can be explained sufficiently by accepting God as a probable hypothesis. The order, harmony of the world can be explained sufficiently by accepting God as a probable hypothesis. For him, mere design of the world is not important. Mere design of the world is not important. What is important is the cumulative defect of the scientific theories to explain the nature. He believes that the world has a unique order, design, and symmetry. There is an adaptability between universe and human knowledge. There is a mutual adaptation between thought and reality. The inanimate nature can administer life, can take care of life. The inanimate nature can administer life. The aesthetic beauty of the world is exquisite. The aesthetic beauty of the world is exquisite. There is an evolution of aesthetic and moral values. There is an evolution of aesthetic and moral values. The emergence of a human being as a result of natural selection is quite intriguing, is quite thought-provoking, is quite intriguing. The emergence of a human being as a result of natural selection is quite intriguing. Hence, it seems that there is a hidden wisdom in the nature. There is a hidden wisdom in the nature. The wisdom is not of the nature, but it belongs to someone other than the nature. The wisdom is not of the nature. It could belong to someone other than the nature. And that wisdom could be the wisdom of the God. The world evolves through some laws, but the laws are not blind. The nature seems to have some reason and purpose, and that cannot be explained by nature itself. It seems to have some other source. Thus, the existence of God can be the best hypothesis to explain the process of evolution. The existence of God can be the best hypothesis to explain the process of evolution. The probability is neither a priori nor statistical. The probability is neither a priori nor statistical. It is a, चाहे तो एक साथ ही या हाइफन भी डाल सकते हैं, it is a logical probability. It is a logical probability. अब हेडिंग बनाएं, Richard Swin, S-W-I-N-B-U-R-N-E. Richard Swinburne's defense या view. लिखें. Richard Swinburne, in Existence of God, compares the evidences in favor of God as well as against the God. He employs Bayesian theory of probability, Bayesian theory of probability, and claims that the evidences in support of the God is more than 50%. आगे लिखें, Newton, referring to the nature of mathematics, maintains that it is not a blind work of blind necessity. It is not a blind work of blind necessity. James Jeans, in Mysterious Universe, James Jeans, in quote-unquote Mysterious Universe, states that the universe appears to have been designed by a pure mathematician. James Jeans, in Mysterious Universe, states that the universe appears to have been designed by a pure mathematician. So all of these have been the variants of teleological argument. Now we'll come to the moral argument. Okay. One of the best exposition of a moral argument you have seen in the writings of Kant, which is again not like technically an argument, but it is like a postulates of morality. He believes for a coherent ethical framework, we need to have something in the background. And you remember, freedom of will, immortality of soul, and again existence of God are these three postulates. So why should there be God? To put the story briefly, क्योंकि आप जानते हैं, थोड़ा सा हम लिखेंगे उसको फिर से. We are not perfectly rational. We are partly rational, and a major segment is teleological, and a major segment is non-rational. Moral laws can be invented, can be discovered through reason. And then he says, two things can fill my heart with awe and admiration. Once you have created your duty through the principle of universalizability, through formula of the end, then perform your duty as if it is like a natural law of the nature and universal law of the nature, and perform duty for the sake of duty. Duty appears like a categorical imperative command, and you have to exert your good will, and over a period of time, in a principle, we will push it behind, and we will be absolutely rational. And that is akin to excellence of character, perfection of character, we become virtuous. In ethical world, we have to remain responsible. It is like, as you sow, so shall you reap. So this was never your intent to be rewarded. But that does not mean that this commendable effort will go unrewarded. So with virtue, that is a virtuous being will be rewarded with happiness. And this is like the summum bonum of this life. Similarly, if someone goes this way, one can become vicious, virtuous and vicious. Again, as you sow, so shall you reap. There must be a guardian who could manage the events of this world in such a way that in accordance with our action, we are rewarded, in accordance with our action, we are punished, and that is how responsibility, accountability is maintained. Hence, there must be a God. But overall, it seems that this is more like a forced. If his ethics is deontological, the biggest reward could be to accomplish excellence of character. Why should you seek happiness? It could be an act of appeasement, as you had seen then. तो कुछ बातों को हम लोग दोबारा लिखेंगे. Now, we have certain position with regard to how you know what is morally right, what is morally wrong. And there are thinkers who talk about conscience, and there is no one theory. One of the most popular explanations is that conscience is the voice of God within, and there is a personal God who is your creator. So people like Hastings, Rasdall, J. Smith, and Cardinal Newman are some of the believers that we have this voice within, and that is like the voice of God. And hence, through your knowledge of ethics and morality, you can prove the existence of God. So Rasdall would say that when you think about moral principles, ethical principles of conduct, it should have universality. There should be objectivity, consistency. It should not change. And human consciousness cannot be the source of such guidelines because our consciousness is mutable. So if the principles of morality have to remain immutable, changeless, objective, there should be one consciousness, which is immutable, perfect, defectless, and that is how God should be accepted as the point of genesis, origin for all moral values. Similarly, J. Smith would also talk about God being there as a guardian, as a source of inspiration, and we all will be held responsible, accountable for every action that we do. Cardinal Newman understands conscience in this way, that intuitively, you do something intuitively, as in directly, immediately from within. You give a sense of guilt, regret, repentance, and likewise a sense of approval, a sense of pride, a sense of moral contentment. And that shows that we have an inherent knowledge of what is right and wrong. So thus, there must be a God who could have created us. If God is perfection personified, and God has created us, his divinity is latent. And you have to listen to the voice of God, and that is akin to the voice of morality as well. So ये सब है moral argument, and you remember moral argument is there in your Indian tradition as well, including in Nyaya Kusumanjali. Okay, तो अब लिखते हैं moral argument. लिखें moral argument. इसमें भी कई argument हम लोग लिखेंगे. First you create the heading Kant's moral argument. One of the most famous moral argument for the existence of God is presented by Immanuel Kant. One of the most famous moral argument is presented by Immanuel Kant. Kant argues that the theoretical arguments can neither prove nor disprove the existence of God. However, he accepts God as one of the postulates of morality. In quote-unquote critique of practical reason, and quote-unquote the groundwork of the metaphysic of morals, unquote, the groundwork of the metaphysic of morals, unquote, Kant presents the moral argument for the existence of God. For Kant, comma, the moral law is like the universal law of nature. It is formulated by pure practical reason. He maintains that two things fill his heart, your mind, with awe and admiration. Two things fill his heart with awe and admiration. comma, या hyphen, the starry heavens above, सितारों से भरी दुनिया ऊपर, the starry heavens above, and the moral law within, and the moral law within. Human beings have goodwill. They have both reason and passion. They are imperfectly rational. Hence, the moral law appears like the categorical imperative. Kant prescribes a deontological commitment, a framework. He prescribes a deontological commitment, a framework. A moral agent ought to perform duty for the sake of duty. Duty shall be regarded as an end rather than a means to some further end. However, a finite being may not attain moral perfection in a finite time. The soul shall remain immortal to accomplish moral perfection. Moreover, a moral framework must be inherently ethical. One must be held accountable for one's acts. Accordingly, Kant claims that a virtuous being must be rewarded with happiness. A virtuous being must be rewarded with happiness. The combination of virtue and happiness is the summum bonum. However, this combination of moral goodness and happiness cannot be brought about by the human beings. They are not analytically related. याद है ना, analytic judgment, यानी virtue में necessarily happiness नहीं है. They are not analytically related. That is, happiness is not contained in the concept of virtue. That is, happiness is not contained in the concept of virtue. Again, there is no causal relationship between virtue and happiness. Thus, there must be an external force to combine virtue with happiness. This can be done, according to Kant, by the perfect being. This can be done by the perfect being. The God alone can arrange the nature whereby a virtuous person could be given happiness and a vicious person could be given punishment. Hence, a just moral framework requires the existence of God. Kant himself maintains that, strictly speaking, this is not an argument. Kant himself maintains that, strictly speaking, this is not an argument. It is a postulate of morality. to impart consistency, coherence, and objectivity to the moral framework. Criticism. The critics observe that the deontological ethics of Kant does not require God and happiness. Kant himself has stated that happiness is not the consideration to pursue moral duty. Hence, virtue can be the greatest reward. It can be pursued for the sake of it. Okay, so this was Kant's, ये भी लिख लीजिए, refer to paper 1 यानी Kant's section for further inputs. उधर प्रॉपर आपके पास सब चीजें ऑलरेडी हैं. अब लिखिए Rashdall, RASS, ऐसे पूरा नाम है Hastings, HASTINGS. Rashdall's argument, RASHDALL, Rashdall's argument. For Rashdall, the moral principles must remain objective and universal. They shall remain immutable, they shall not change with the time and position. But human consciousness is mutable. Hence, Rashdall argues that the moral principles shall be rooted in the divine consciousness, which is immutable. Therefore, God must exist. God alone can be the locus of objective moral values. For him, relative and natural value cannot be moral. Relative and natural value cannot be moral. The sense of duty and the moral law cannot be relative. God, as the source of morality, can instill a sense of obligation and uphold its universality. In the Brothers Karamazov, इसका रेफरेंस पहले भी आया है. In the Brothers Karamazov, ZOV, in your religion and morality, we have Dostoevsky, Fyodor Dostoevsky. In the Brothers Karamazov of Dostoevsky, it is maintained, it is observed that if there is no God, then everything could be permitted. Next है J. Smith's argument. J.E. Smith. J. Smith maintains that responsibility is central to morality. Morality would become meaningless if the agent fails to remain responsible. Morality would become meaningless if the agent fails to remain responsible. One can remain responsible only when God is accepted as the moral guardian. One can remain responsible only when God is accepted as the moral guardian. However, according to others, responsibility can be cultivated through other interventions. There is no need to accept God. Third, लिखिए Cardinal Newman's argument. For him, the voice of conscience is the voice of God. One intuitively develops a sense of guilt, shame, and regret the moment one violates a moral principle. Similarly, the conscience creates a sense of pride as and when one upholds a moral principle. Thus, conscience must be regarded as the voice of God. This voice has an intrinsic purity. It does not cater to the sensual gratification. It inspires one to choose profound actions. However, many others maintain that conscience is rooted in nurture. It is a product of socialization. Moreover, the voice of conscience can change across individuals. Hence, it cannot be the voice of God. Okay, so what we have seen, moral arguments, and then criticism of every version, whether it is Kant, Aristotle, J. Smith, or Cardinal Newman. And then you see moral argument in Indian tradition also. In the case of Buddhism and Jainism, there is a moral argument, law of karma, but there is no God. Okay, so hence, again, this argument had its own effect. So we have gone through 4 major proofs: cosmological, ontological, teleological, moral. But कहीं भी पूरी तरह से conclusive proof नहीं मिला. So what should we do? So you all know Pascal's laws. He has written a paper, The Wager. हाँ वही पास्कल. तो पास्कल वो लोग दखल रखते हैं बहुत चीजों में. तो he has written an interesting paper, The Wager. It is like where should you put your money? जैसे दांव खेलना. बहुत सारे लोग उसमें क्या बोलते हैं, स्टॉक एक्सचेंज वगैरह में शेयर्स वगैरह में पैसे लगाते हैं. आजकल ऑनलाइन लोग बिजी रहते हैं उसी में. तो वो राय भी देते हैं कि कहाँ पैसा लगाना सेफ होगा. तो ये क्या है, ये कैलकुलेशन है. तो वन में वांट मैक्सिमम रिटर्न आउट ऑफ एवरीथिंग. तो अगर कोई ये बोलता है कि कहाँ आपको दांव खेलना चाहिए जहाँ पे फायदा ही फायदा हो, शुड बी प्रिपेयर फॉर दिस सिविल सर्विसेज एग्जाम, ये फायदे का होगा, कंपटीशन तो बहुत ज्यादा है. तो आई में से इसमें हारने का है ही नहीं, इसमें सिर्फ जीत है. द ग्रेटेस्ट जीत और सक्सेस इज टू एजुकेट योरसेल्फ. तो अगर कोई तैयारी करे इस एग्जाम की एटलीस्ट 1 ईयर विद कंप्लीट कमिटमेंट, यू अंडरस्टैंड द रिवॉर्ड इज इंस्टेंट. यू एंड अप ग्रूमिंग योरसेल्फ होलिस्टिकली. उसमें अगर फिलॉसफी ऑप्शनल ले ले तो अगेन इट इज लाइक instant reward. Okay, and then while you have been given this reward of becoming an educated person, most likely Dholpur House will also be able to take cognizance of your erudition. वैसे पास्कल से हम लोग पूछ रहे हैं कि क्या करें, गॉड को माने कि ना माने. तो ये कैलकुलेटेड रिस्क बता रहे हैं कि फायदा कहाँ पे है. तो he would say let's believe that there is no God. Okay, मान लीजिए या उल्टा करके बोलते हैं, let's say that you don't believe in God, you don't believe in God, and God does not exist. You gain nothing, you lose nothing. You believe in God, God does not exist. You lose nothing, you gain nothing. You don't believe in God, but God exists, you lose everything. You believe in God and God exists, you gain everything. तो कैलकुलेटेड रिस्क में कहाँ पे फायदा ही फायदा है, मानने में. मान रहे नहीं है कोई बात नहीं, मान रहे कहीं हैं तो यू नो सिर्फ फायदा है, और कहीं ना मानने और निकल गए गॉड, तो ये है वो. तो नाउ वी विल हैव टू बी सब्जेक्टेड टू सो मच पनिशमेंट. तो इन्होंने एक कैलकुलेटेड रिस्क दिया. बट व्हेन बिलीवर्स वुड कम टू दिस explanation, they don't like it. They say that we are not believing in God because of certain instant gain. It is all about faith, and bottom line remains, as we have tried to understand, that if you understand God as the truth, And when you again think about that God in different ways, indeed, this life is meaningful. This life can remain a life of self-respect and dignity. Life can go beyond animal existence. If it has to become a life where we can flourish, where we can thrive, then that life must be governed by profound values. And we all will have to believe in that value. Whether it is a personal God or not, we have to accept some cardinal values. And one of the way to illustrate foundational cardinal values would be God. तो इस हिसाब से आप फिर से अपना एक पोजीशन बना सकते हैं कि क्या आप गॉड को मानते हैं, गांधी से भी आप इसको समझ सकते हैं. तो राइट डाउन दिस कंक्लूडिंग पैराग्राफ नाउ. तो हेडिंग बनाइए कंक्लूजन. The conventional proofs for the existence of God fail to establish the existence of God conclusively. The outlook and the perspective of an individual can play a crucial role in accepting and rejecting the existence of God. However, if the arguments could not prove the existence, the non-existence of the God is also not established. In this regard, Pascal has presented an interesting observation. अब एक हेडिंग बनाइए, the wager. Pascal maintains that the existence of God is an enigma. The existence of God is an enigma. However, it is always advantageous to believe in God. He maintains that we should put our wager on the basis of risk. He observes that if God exists and one believes in him, if God exists and one believes in him, one gains everything. But if there is no God, if God does not exist, but if there is no God and one still believes in him, one would lose nothing. LOSE, one would lose nothing. Again, if there is a God and one does not believe in him, then one would lose everything. Hence, it is pragmatic to believe in God. It is a well-calculated risk to accept God. The critics, however, do not agree with him. The believers maintain that the belief in God is a matter of faith. It cannot be based on any pragmatic calculation. Karl Jaspers maintain that the belief in God is beyond all reason and justification. He remarks that a proved God is no God. A proved God is no God. Paul Tillich, याद है Paul Tillich? आगे भी हम लोग इनको रेफर करेंगे. Paul Tillich maintains that God is a being as such. It cannot be rationally proved or disproved. It is the fundamental source of everything. Impersonalistic notion में we have referred to him. टर्स्टीजेन, ये सब ऐसे नाम याद नहीं करना है, ऐसे आप से बिलीवर्स मिलते हैं। टर्स्टीजेन, TERSTEEGEN, maintains that a comprehended God is no God. जिस गॉड को समझ लिए वो गॉड नहीं है। A comprehended God is no God. Okay, so we have, हाँ, अभी आ रहे हैं सबसे स्ट्रॉन्ग आर्ग्यूमेंट to refute the existence of God. तो फिर से when you plan your paper, हम लोग क्वेश्चन में जाएंगे, तो that day you will have plenty of possibilities कि कैसे कौन सी चीज को कहां से उठा के लेके आए. Okay, this can also be used as an argument against the existence of God, and we'll also see the defense. So we have covered 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's come to now the fifth topic. Briefly, at least I can set the stage, the problem of evil. ये एक समझिए, अभी तक के जो पहले लंबे टॉपिक हम लोग वो कर रहे हैं, the remaining ones are not going to take long. Okay. So now the problem of evil. Evil refers to suffering, it refers to vice, it refers to the violence, the barbarism that you see. Anything that can outrage your sentiments can be seen as evil, immoral deed. Okay. Now, God is regarded as the perfect being. He is the creator, sustainer, could be the destroyer. And now many people, as someone who is very critical, would try to understand this mismatch. That is, God is absolutely perfect. God is someone who is absolutely good. God is absolutely benevolent. God is compassionate. God is someone who can be empathetic, sympathetic. And then God is omnipotent. One of the earliest kind of argument is posed by Epicurus. We have certain traditions in Greek, and after Epicurus we have Epicureans. He's someone who is prior to Mill talks about intellectual pleasure or pleasure of the mind as something that you should prefer over body. So he's not talking about quality, but he says intellectual pleasures are without pain, while bodily pleasures may have many elements of pain in it. So Epicurus has given this kind of argument, or again certain thought-provoking observations. He says, if God is willing to prevent evil, but is unable to, if God is willing to prevent evil, but is unable to, then God cannot be omnipotent. If God is not willing to prevent evil, but is able to, then God cannot be benevolent. God is a malevolent. If you tell me that God is absolutely perfect, if God is benevolent, God is omnipotent, then why is there evil? So we fail to understand these two things according to Epicurus. So one of the earliest. Likewise, Hume ने अभी आपको hint दिया कि there is disorder, disharmony, and when you talk about God as a perfect being, so they don't go together. Okay. So when we think about evil and sorrow, if you analyze the life we are into, in many cases you understand that that suffering is perpetuated, is imposed on us by the acts of human. We can also sometimes use the word anthropogenic. In many cases, it is like a pandemic, in some cases a flood, earthquake, volcano eruptions. All of them can also be because of nature. So hence, we can think about moral evil, which is due to the acts of humans, and we can think about some evil as a natural evil. In some way, they are interconnected. Generally, we remain very refined, that if we are carrying our breakfast, lunch, everyone who is around us, we offer. But imagine that there is a kind of situation where we are stranded on an island for a few days, और कुछ निकले थे घर से, तो पराठे पड़े हुए थे फोल्ड करके, चुपके से खा लेंगे वो, ऐसे खाएंगे किसी को पता भी नहीं चलेगा, कुछ देर बोलेंगे नहीं कि दर्द होता करते हैं, बोल नहीं सकते. So then all our goodness is gone, and during natural evil we can become more morally vicious. And in some way, again, during moral evil, if our model of development is flawed, people may say that who is responsible for all the suffering of earthquake? Why didn't you study nature? कहीं भी जाके घर बना दिए, कहीं भी टैंक्स बना दिए. तो who is responsible? Nature, आग में कोई कूद जाए तो आग की गलती है कि कूदने वाले की गलती है. So if our model of urban planning development is flawed, if we are having deforestation, is so much siltation, तो फिर से flood भी आएगा. So somewhere both of them are interconnected. Now the challenge is with the believers. Their task is cut out. He explain. जैसे अभी एपिक्यूरस ने कहा कि गॉड परफेक्ट हैं, बेनेवोलेंट हैं, ओमनीपोटेंट हैं, तो बताओ कैसे हुआ? He could have created a better human being. It is as simple as that you buy a product and then it does not work well. You call at customer care and first thing you say कि भैया बनाना नहीं आता है तो बनाते क्यों? तो दुनिया बनाने वाले क्या तेरे मन में समाया? काहे को दुनिया बनाई है सब? और अगर बनाया और आप इतने अच्छे निर्माता हैं तो कुछ अच्छा बनाते, ऐसे कैसे कैसे इंसान बना दिए आपने कि उनके कर्म देख के शर्म आती है. तो this is this question. So we'll see the defense. So if you remember, during Leibniz, I had told you about the only text that he could publish during his lifetime. The theodicy. Theodicy is like that defense whereby theists, believer reconcile the perfection,